10.6, equations of circles. All right, so just for reference, we're going to have this equation of a circle. If you already wrote it, obviously you have it, but we've got x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared, where the center is at hk and the radius is r. So this is for one that is not at the origin. For the equation of a circle at the origin, then that is just x squared plus y squared equals r squared. So these first problems say give the center and radius of the circle. So they're going to give us an equation. X minus 5 squared plus y minus 1 squared equals 25. So there's a couple ways to think about this depending on how you want to do it, but the first thing I need to do is, I know it's supposed to be in, I'm just going to simply say x squared plus y squared equals r squared. Okay, this term obviously, it's got other stuff in here that just tells me it's not centered at the origin. So this number is not written as a number squared. So I have to remember that this is actually the r squared value that I see. So what does that mean that r is? 5. It's the square root of whatever that number is. I think most of them are going to be stuff that you can easily just take the square root of and they're going to come out to be like a nice whole number. But if it's something that's not a perfect square, obviously you can use your calculator and figure that out. So this is going to be 5 squared, so I'm going to rewrite it this way just so I can see everything. So I'm looking for the center and radius of my circle. So the center is at HK. Now notice up here, the formula is x minus h and y minus k. The center is at HK. So if you want to think about it, I like to think about it this way, is that the center is at the opposite of whatever the sign is here. So since this is a negative sign, down here it's plus. If this was a positive sign, this number would be negative. The sign of the center is opposite of whatever you see in the parentheses. Okay, so that means that my center here is going to be at 5, 1. And the radius, since I've rewritten it as something squared, the radius is just 5. That's as simple as that. Number 10, we've got x plus 2 squared plus y minus 3 squared equals 36. Now, if you don't want to have to rewrite it every time like I did here in blue, you can just like put a cross through this number and rewrite it as something squared. So what squared is 36? So I'm going to scratch this out and just write this as 6 squared so I don't have to rewrite the whole thing. So I'm looking for the center of my circle. So we come here, the x value is the opposite of whatever the sign is here. So this is a positive 2. That means this is negative 2. The y coordinate, I was given negative 3. That means that it is a positive 3. So our center is at negative 2, 3. And then my radius is what? Yep, radius is 6. Uh, 12. X minus 1/2 squared plus y plus 3/4 squared equals 1/4. So what squared is 1/4? What's the square root of 1? What's the square root of 4? So the square root of 1/4 is 1/2. Now I'm going to put parentheses around it because that tells me that the whole thing's being squared. So my center, what would it be?
1/2, negative 3/4.
Yep, opposite sign, so positive 1/2, negative 3/4. And what about the radius? Yep, 1/2. All right, any questions about those? If it's just something like, let's say, x squared plus y squared equals 9. What's the center of that?
Origin.
Yep, 0, 0. What's the radius?
3.
3, because 9 is 3 squared. Okay, so if you have one like that, that's how you would do that. All right, we're going to work the opposite way now. We're going to look at, they're going to give us a center and a radius, and we're going to write the equation with what we're given. So number 20, they tell us that the center is at 4, 0, and the radius is 4. Yep, so this one's backwards from the other one. So what I would do when I'm given something like this is I would go ahead and set up my equation here, like this. And I would take that and then I would fill it in. So just like we said to find, let me go back up here. Let me go back to this one. To find the center, we took the opposite of the sign that's in here. Well, it works the same way in reverse. If I'm given the center, the value that goes in here is the opposite of this. So if the x value is 4, what has to go in here?
Negative 4.
Yep, negative 4. And then with the 0, as a general rule, the formula, right, I'm pointing up here to the thing that I wrote actually on the board, is minus. So we're going to write minus 0. And then the radius is 4, but we have to square that value when we put it in there. So you can either leave it like this, other than rewriting this side over here, or you can get rid of the 0 altogether. That's up to you. I would personally do it this way as x minus 4 squared plus y squared equals 16. But we could leave it like this, other than calling this 16. Either of these would be an acceptable way to write your answer. Okay? Questions about how we write them? I'm going to do some more, but.
So it's optional to simplify it or not?
Yeah, I mean, they left it as, in the example in the PowerPoint, it was with a 0. So you can leave it, if you like it written that way, just so you can see the center, that's fine. But either way, I'm good with. Just this part over here, where it's like whatever number's being squared, you should go ahead and write that number. So, I mean, that's probably only going to be like a -1 if you forget to do that, but. 22. Center is at -1, -3. Radius is 6. Someone tell me, let's see if we can figure out how to set this one up.
X plus 1 squared plus y plus 3 squared equals 36.
Yep, I'm going to initially write it as 6 squared and then I'll change it, but yeah. So we have, in here, we have the opposite sign of the center. So since it's at -1, -3, I put +1 and +3 here. And then I've got, over here, the radius squared, so 6 squared. So I would just take and write that as 36. You can rewrite it, or And if you want to, you can go straight to writing the 6 squared as 36, or like in the previous one, the 4 squared as 16. I'm just writing it this way so that we see that we're taking the radius value and squaring it to get our answer. Let's see. All right, we're going to look at the ones that where we have to use the distance formula. So I'm going to do a refresher on the distance formula, but instead of using D for distance, I'm going to use R for a radius. So I'm going to say R is equal to the square root of its x2, whatever that is, minus x1 squared, plus y2 minus y1 squared. And again, if you forget that, I'm going to point up here to the board, but I had my formula here was x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. The only thing that's modification of this to get this value is that I'm taking the square root of both sides to get r by itself, and that's where this formula is coming from. Okay, so in a sense, this is my h and this is my k here. Okay, so what they're going to do is they're going to give you a point on the circle and the center, and you need to write the equation. So we're going to have to find r, and then we're going to take and we're going to write the equation. So number 24, it says the center is at 1, 2, and the point on the circle is the point 4, 6. Now, you're going to end up getting the same thing either way, but technically the center is my x1, y1 values, and the on the circle values are the x2, y2 as far as the formula that I'm plugging in here. Obviously, this is still also h and k. If you want to think about it that way instead, that's fine. And I'm solving for r. So I'm going to use this formula that I wrote in green to plug in the stuff. So I've got r is equal to the square root of 4 minus 1 squared plus 6 minus 2 squared. So this is the square root of 3 squared, which is 9, plus 4 squared, which is 16. So that's the square root of 25. I feel like that's the same value we had in the one in the example. So that means that r is equal to 5. I'm not done though. I now have to take that and write my equation. So how would I set up my equation of my circle since I now have the center and I have my radius?
X
minus 1 squared plus, oh my goodness, y minus 2 squared is equal to 5 squared.
Yep. So I have x, we do the opposite sign for this stuff here, so -1, and then for the y, it's -2, and then we take our r and we square it, and again, you can either write it as 5 squared initially, or you can go straight to writing it as 25, like that. So this is officially the answer that they're looking for, okay? But if the only thing that you have wrong in this is the r value, I'm going to look and see if your work for r makes sense. Like if you did the work right, you just like added something wrong, whatever, but you followed the right steps. Obviously, I'm not going to dock a ton of points if the only thing that you did wrong was finding, if like your r is wrong, obviously you're going to get the final answer wrong. So you're not going to get double off for that. Oh, this is a good one. 26. The center is at -5, 3. The diameter is 8. What is different about this one compared to all the other ones? They gave us diameter instead of radius. So if I have diameter, how do I find the radius?
Divide by 2.
Yep, diameter is, or let's see, we'll just do this. Diameter divided by 2 is equal to the radius. So that means that my radius is what? Yep, 8 over 2 would give us 4. So this one doesn't even require me to do the distance formula. I'm just taking this piece of information. So now, somebody other than Jonathan, tell me how to find the equation of this circle.
X plus 5 squared plus y minus 3 squared equals 8.
Nope.
4 squared.
4. Yep, the radius value. So that's what they're trying to trick you here. So 4 squared. And so, again, I can either write it 4 squared or I can go straight to writing it as 16. Okay, any questions about that? Now, there is other stuff in this section. It says, you know, there's graphing. If you feel like you need more practice with finding the center and radius, there's other problems that just say to take the equation and graph it. But you could take those equations and just find the center and radius of those two if you feel like you need some more practice with these aside for what I'm giving you. So we've got problems 7, 9, 11, 19, 21, 23, and 25. So 23 and 25, both are going to require you to use the distance formula to find r, and then you'll take that and write your equation of your circle.